create a new one, I think.
So what's wrong with it?
I think I set the wrong camera, so the video is not going through, I don't think. Can you see it if you go to that link?
No, I rough draft in one again, so I don't need this. Like I can use it.
No one's watching yet, so we're good.
Oh my god, why is it saying that my password is only 1 second?
If you want to go to youtube.com/ JU6FUVDSFZE.
But it's like
The page is not down. Additionally,
Okay, let me double check.
oh, it's /live screening.
Sorry, I didn't see your text. I'm glad you found it. Oh, tube is just youtube.be. Yeah, okay. Okay, I think I have to make a new one. It's picking up all this audio, by the way.
no, it's tomorrow. Literally, I do not get stressed out about it. Are you okay? It's very hard. It'll be fine. It will. It will. I'm really sorry. What about you? Your stuff?
No one's watching it, so we're good.
I can also. I was like, I'm just taking pictures. What's your final? Very bad, but like it's okay. So right now I'm currently applying to tomorrow. Also, I have a comp final tomorrow. And then I have like 2 different chemistry to write down. Oh yeah, you're saying like yeah.
We're just gonna leave the miniature.
Whatever. It'll all get done. I have to like pull them all night on Thursday night. Oh my god. Can I help it's like fine.
Yeah.
Like the thing is like I'm kind of thinking like all the questions that goes out after like about the second. Yeah. So like if I pull it all later, then I just finish everything.
What in the world? I've not seen this
Then I
before.
can see I can offer moral support. I can go buy politics. When are you going home? Sometimes. So you're Friday night out? Yeah, probably my parents will know.
Okay, we'll just post the presentation. I'll just post the presentation and then they can follow along.
Would it be easy to like do it off of
Yeah, you could try that. If I end this, I'll have to start a new one. Is it okay if I log into my YouTube channel?
yeah.
Okay.
Also, like, about people like, I just had like they got it because I got my finals on Friday at 5.
No idea what's going on.
And then they have to pack. Yeah. Like, yeah, no. And I think if you have those
Okay. So that's to come, so that's okay. Oh, thank you.
worst case, it's like, yeah, that's kind of my plan. But like, you know, there's oh, I didn't ask, but you. I was like, even if somebody else I didn't ask me for it. I'll just like, oh yeah,
Notifications.
doing like someone else you see how let's someone else like me and Sarah and all school we can always go just do like over on Friday.
Okay, let's try another way.
Yeah. I do like my best. Like it's so fun because like when I go to bed, I have a picture set to
Okay, that's not working.
No.
Thank you though. Let's see. I did. Okay. I'm going to re-download that.
Okay, I see. They just they are. And they have their doubles, or you walk in, you like one area, and then you both have a private little sleep.
Almost ready to start. It's a music thing, right? We just start late.
It's just like but also everyone can see everything. Every morning I wake up, I notice years ago, you wake up at 6 so I just checked that.
Oh no. Maya. Is that right?
Nobody.
Shall we start?
And I was like, do I like close the shade? I don't like, what do you do that? I don't know. I just kind of like looked at it and I was like,
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for coming to Claire's map presentation. I'm Jennifer Brown, and I will be introducing her, though I'm sure all of you know her way better than I do. Claire Davis, hers, is a fourth-year music and history double major. Her primary instrument is the viola, and she plays in the Grinnell Symphony Orchestra, the chamber ensembles, and various other musical groups around campus, including Coach Lincoln Musico, which I direct. As a scholar, she is particularly interested in the music of women composers and musicians. And in 2020, she won our department's research award, the Steiner Award for Research, for her paper, The Social Circumstances in Which Fanny M. Hensel Composed and Published. And so here we get another installment of her interest in women composers and musicians. Next year, she's been applying to master's programs in viola performance, and we wish her luck with that. So.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm very excited to finally share Isabella Beaton's quartet with you. This began in the spring of 2019 in a way because that was when I first learned about Isabella, and a colleague of mine at Drake Community Library, Liz Cavalli, showed me Dan Kaiser's blog post about her. And then a whole bunch of stuff happened and got in the way of me researching further. And this past summer, her descendant, Kay Doyle, contacted the libraries at the college and Drake Community Library about donating a very large collection of her manuscripts, performance dresses, and lots of other materials. And he kicked off this project. So this is Isabella. The left one is probably an earlier pamphlet, and the right one is from a program for her opera. And you can see that she defined herself primarily as a pianist-composer, and then later more as a composer-pianist. So yes, as I said, the Isabella Beaton papers, which are now in the special collections and archives here at Grinnell College, were donated just this past summer. And for me, the first, my path of studying Beaton was a little tenuous because I had this idea of like, oh, but is she worth studying? We don't know anything about her. And again, like women composers have been covered up. They don't get talked about as much. And so it felt like a big step for me to put myself out there in a way and study her. But yes, I am so grateful I did, and it's been an amazing opportunity, and I want to thank a lot of people for making this happen. So first, Kay Doyle, historian Dan Kaiser, who first wrote about her and did amazing foundational research on her. My service and work study supervisor, Monique Shore, and library assistant Liz Cavalli at Drake Library, special collections librarian and archivist Chris Jones, library special collections and archives assistant Alison Peck, and librarian Laura Michelson, and then the Drake Community Library, Grinnell Special Collections, and Grinnell Historical Museum for housing the collection, and Professor Jennifer Brown, my advisor, Professor Jimon Cha for helping me with theory, and also thanks to Aiden Danbury for that, and of course my family and friends who have encouraged me the whole way. And to start us off, I thought we'd listen to it. So that is the quartet, at least the computer recording of it. So we'll actually be performing it 3 times next semester. Thank you very much to my quartet. Grace Davis is unable to be here, but they'll be playing it with me at my senior recital, chamber ensemble concert, and potentially also a concert at the library. So, this is a short biography of Isabella Beaton. I highly encourage all of you to read Dan Kaiser's post about her. So she was a conspicuous figure in the musical life of Cleveland, Ohio, as one recommender put it. She filled many musical positions throughout her life. She started in Harlan, Iowa as a organist and vocalist, and then when she went to Europe and moved to Cleveland, she was mainly a pianist composer, but also a violinist, educator, and administrator. A particular note is that she graduated from the Iowa Conservatory of Music, which was a part of Grinnell or Iowa College at the time, so about 1903. And she got her degree in piano, voice culture, harmony, and history. And that was in 1890. So as I said, she worked in Harlan, Iowa following her graduation, and then she was able to study in Berlin and Paris from 1894 to 1899. And there she studied with Emma Koch, Moritz Moskowski, and Otis Barlow-Blakey. And then in 1899, she moved back to the U.S. with her, to live with her aunt in Cleveland, Ohio, and she joined the teaching staff at Cleveland School of Music. And then 10 years later, she created her own school, the Beaton School of Music, and around that time, she was advertising herself as a pianist composer. So composition seems to have become what she was best known for. She had a rigorous performance schedule. At one point, she was doing 20 recitals a year for about 5 years, almost 10 years. In 1906, one newspaper said that with the exception of Amy Beach, who is the most prominent American female composer of the 19th century, she was the only woman in the United States whose work had been played by major orchestras in the U.S. She did receive plenty of praise for her work, but it was generally lukewarm, and it wasn't really followed by any more opportunities. So, for example, Paul Teichert in 1909 had not established who he was or how Isabella Beaton knew him, but he wrote 2 pieces for her discussing her accomplishments. And he said that as a composer, she has achieved success and her compositions are known. So evidently positive, but not over enthusiastic. And she was known for her compositions were used as a teaching material in colleges and conservatories. But beyond her family duty obligations, which Dan Kaiser goes into detail about in his post, we also need to acknowledge that a lot of this everything she navigated and intended was because she was a woman composer. And there's a recurring pattern and strong evidence that though people praised her work and saw how well she did, they didn't see her as a serious or professional composer or pianist. So it just did not enter their minds that they would continue working with her in that way. So the social structures circumscribed her because of her gender identity. And she did not have the resources like Amy Beach to surmount those obstacles. So she did not have the money, social contacts, that sort of thing. And then specifically about the Isabella Beaton papers, I have only skimmed the surface with this quartet. And I would love to look more into it. And for example, these are very interesting parts. Her music manuscripts. So there are some that look as if she had used them for teaching, for worksheets, others that were scraps of pieces that are unknown, and then others we can trace drafts. And then we also have her sheet music library, which the inventory composed the early part of my research on this quartet. And then also documents relating to missionary societies, which she was heavily involved in. But unfortunately, I do not know much about that. And they also relate to the Armenian genocide in present-day Turkey. There's also records of her repertoire and press notices, and also records pertaining to her school and its incorporation. So for history of the quartet specifically, it was published in Paris around 1898 to 99. And it's also called by its English name, Quartet for Stringed Instruments and the Liquid So this is Paul E. Pickard shows up again at the bottom there, but this comes from a notebook that she kept of copies of recommendations that she hand copied. So Frederick A. Stock was the director of the Theodore Thomas Orchestra, which was a pretty prominent orchestra at the time. And she probably writes that he said the little allegro scherzando alone from Orlando Furioso music was a clean as well as clever bit of musical writing. We do not know what the Orlando Furioso music was. It's likely a public concert or a compilation. And again, you can see that it's positive, very complimentary, but also not overly enthusiastic. It's not followed up with suggestions of wanting to work with her again in the future. And then Tykert writes that another Miss Beaton's composition, this Allegro Scherzando, that her violin professor, Bertelier, and professor in Chicago spoke highly of, and then it was also performed at least once by the Decorated Quartet of Montreal. We couldn't find evidence of further performances except in 1923. So the Scarlet and Black said that it was performed by the Grinnell Quartet at one of their concerts in that year. And then at the end of her life, in her obituary in the Grinnell Herald, they mentioned the quartet as one of two pieces that they mentioned. So it remained one of the most prominent pieces that she wrote. And they just mentioned that it was published in Paris and that these and other of her compositions have been performed by some of the finest orchestras both in Europe and America. So for theory, compositionally, it is a fugue. So you might have heard that there is one voice at the beginning of the piece that starts out with the subject, the main idea, and then the next voice picks that up, and then it's traded off and interwoven with other lines. And then there's also compound melody, when there's two lines of melody occurring at the same time, and distant tonal relationships. And these are best explained by Neo-Riemannian or PLR theory, which is this bridge between tonal theory, like 19th century and before, to 20th century atonality and all the chromaticism. And yeah, it's highly mathematical and it's amazing. She's so avant-garde for having used this and so well. And then you could also hear the chromaticism and the passing on the surface. So when we listen to it again, I'll point out different examples, but they probably struck you as you listen. It's like temporary dissonance that really just comes out of the texture, and then she goes right back to more tonal. So for my editorial philosophy, I have two editions, the critical edition, which is the exact, or not exact, but I transcribed my principal source, which was the published score, and then I compared it to the published parts, and then the autographed parts and score, and compiled those and edited them into one version. And that is the critical edition. And then the performing edition is the critical edition with my bowing suggestions, articulation suggestions added in. So James Greer wrote that when sources transmit ambiguity, we have to recognize that looking for the composer's intention and making decisions based on that is futile. So for my goal, I wanted to compare the sources and make a judgment call as to what Beaton was most likely expecting to publish, based on consistencies among the parts and my knowledge of the string player. So the published score, as I said, is my principal source, and she normally, conforming to notation tendencies, especially with slurs, and parallel phrases was my primary consideration and helps me form my editing decisions. So, would you like to listen to it again now? Okay. Let me know if it gets too loud. There's a big variation. So at this point, 3 voices have entered in. If you look. You can hear the canals here. Alternating. That's one part where Oh, yeah, please clap for people. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so the texture, I just find it fascinating, and in some parts she's very traditional about, for example, ending the piece on those big chords, but in other ways, she's very innovative with how she combines the fugue with the harmony. So again, this will be performed 3 times next semester, and downloadable versions of the critical and performing editions will be available on my website at this link, and the critical report will also be up there. And these are the works I cited today. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
You mentioned your opera. Do you know anything about that?
Yes, I did not look into it very much, but we do have a stack of the programs from her opera. It was about an Aztec princess, so definitely questionable material. But we have a program for that, and also, I believe, a few copies or sheets of manuscript, possibly. But yeah, definitely something to look into.
No guess the score could be anywhere.
No.
Was it performed?
I believe so. I don't know how big of a staging it was.
Yeah, maybe if it was performed in an opera house, I think oftentimes they keep the scores.
Yeah.
Oh,
You get to that opera house wherever it was, in France. Possibly.
it might be in Ohio, because I think it was,
Ohio.
yeah, written after she came back. Any impressions of the quartet or things that struck you?
I think it's delightful. I wish that we had more of her work. One question I have is, since you have put together a performance score, is that something that will be available to share if others wanted
Yeah.
to perform it?
Definitely. I hope it'll be performed as much as possible.
Yeah. So I don't know how those things get shared, but it should be shared among the Grinnell alumni community for others that are
yeah.
involved in streaming groups.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great idea.
But could you maybe talk about a little bit about your editorial process? So what was involved in doing the editing?
For sure. So I started looking at the published score and exactly transcribing it using MuseScore, which is a score editing program. And then I compared the exact transcription. So these are my notes here. To the autograph parts, this published parts, and the autograph score. So all the discrepancies from the published score, I made notes of. Let's see what it is. So a lot of it was articulation and slurs. Can you see it somewhat? No, okay. But yeah, so I basically noted all the discrepancies, and then I went through each of those and made decisions based on immediate context, and then her habits of slurring. As I said, the slurs were one of the biggest things I had to consider because there was a lot of variation. And then after making those editing decisions, I entered them into my critical edition, and yeah, and then.
Well, you also invoked your knowledge of string
Oh,
playing. Yes. And so thinking about what physical gestures would be involved in playing it with one articulation versus another.
Mhm. Definitely.
You would invoke your musical training.
Yeah, that was it.
This is not related to the quartet, but you mentioned she had a connection to the Armenian genocide.
Yes.
And I was wondering if you could elaborate on what you know about that connection.
Yeah, it was really surprising. I just found a letter, or not a letter, a short story written by a missionary who witnessed the Armenian genocide. And I don't know how she knew this missionary personally or how she got her hands on the story. It was problematic romance set during the Armenian genocide. But yeah, it was quite surprising to come across that in her papers. And also fitting because I'm in the modern Middle East class, and at the same time we were learning about the Armenian genocide. So it really stood out to me.
She was also active in the war relief efforts during the First World War.
Yeah, she was fluent in Italian, French, and German. So she went into homes and sold Liberty bonds to the government. And then, just as a missionary, she's also very involved while in Europe and then in America again. She was very involved as going out and talking to people, and her belief in social justice, I suppose, her definition of it is very strong. Yeah.
Sorry to have to. Just kind of a comment. It's interesting. Well, it's great to hear about the Iowa Conservatory, because it seems as if the college isn't so self-aware of that part of our heritage. I'm not sure why that is, but another composer who taught here from 1905 to I think 1923, Edward Sheaf, who was this fabulous composer who most Cornellians don't know about. And there are so many kind of connections here. One is the missionary connection, because with the social gospel, there's such a strong influence of missionaries, and Edward Sheaf was part of a Baptist missionary family, and so it's a combination of music and this missionary field. Kind of our going with this is just that's. I'm really glad to hear about this time of the college, so that we can embrace it. And it's strange to me that for Edward Sheaf, of course, he taught here, and he was just really quite a significant composer, but he's kind of forgotten. Maybe partly because he was German, but maybe also because the conservatory died. And maybe, if the conservatory had died, maybe, Isabella Beaton, maybe we would have, celebrated her more.
Yeah. I hope we can celebrate her now. But, yeah.
And she was born and raised in Grinnell.
Yeah, she was.
Died here.
She was born here, raised Congregationalist, so from the start that was always a big part of her life. And she began piano at age 4 and entered the conservatory at 9, and they gave her first public concert at 12 years old. And then when she came back to Grinnell, she had been caring for her sick aunt who had just died, and she herself was starting to suffer perhaps from Alzheimer's. She died in Mount Pleasant, which was a hospital for mental illness, and it's not quite understood how she died, where she died, but
she died. I saw her death certificate. She died of influenza, but
yeah, there was a lot of underlying causes going on. So sad ending, but she had a very exciting life.
And her parents were some of the first people settlers in Grinnell in 1855. And her father was a cabinet maker and organ builder.
And Dan Kaiser's post has all of this and more. So.
Yes.
Where's the post?
It's on Grinnell Stories. I will figure it out. It's called Isabella Beaton, Queen Among Musicians. And he's done a lot of detail there. Yeah,
It's a very exhaustive article.
it's amazing. Yeah, I highly recommend reading it. Any other questions? Thank you all so much for coming.
Iowa College. That's the funniest thing. Iowa College. Why did they have the name?
Iowa College next to University of Iowa. And I live.
What about the project category of things?
Yeah.
Yeah, neither am I. I wonder what happened to that. 20?
It started in Dallas.
What?
It started in Dallas.
Oh, wow.
Grinnell College. Science. Oh no, the University of Minnesota.
I use some.
Political science.
No, I represent it to you all.
Yeah.
Like just release a private presentation I've got. It'll just be making Christian.
Very cool.
I will actually go to the
I'm 19 and oh,
Oh, you were I'll bring you ice cream.
I was successful. I visited Disney
And what does that have to do with Butch?
Claire! Because
Girl boss! Girl boss! I can't believe you did this in the undergrad. I'm so proud of you. And you girl boss. Girl boss. It was more out of it. We were just like, yeah, so this is what happened. This is it. The boss. Like that, literally, yeah, you're so proud. I'm so proud of you. You are beautiful.
so proud. I can't believe you did this as an undergraduate. I was really so proud. Yeah. It's one of those things where like I love the idea. I love Girl boss, girl boss. Girl boss has my senior recital.
History classes.
Yeah.
Classes, those students express.
Bro, it was on the slides. It was on the slides, bro. It was on the slides. I thought it was all She probably took a training to use code.
Yeah. Solo and silent. But you said slower and silent.
She was there for 3 years.
Wow.
Yes.
Your co-stars stayed.
I know. Actually, because I don't get this one and then I'm like, that was good. That's good.
Practice telling It is pretty, it's, thank you. They're pretty That's exactly what I think. Actually, said you, I like you both. Joy, bye. Sarah, I have you on co-star, don't I?
Yep. I think that you were my first person.
Oh, it's your first one.